Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to another Kavya Lab Vaidya session organized by the Consciousness Studies program at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. So, Kavya Lab is a platform, like you are all familiar by now, where we share poetry from different multilingual poets from across the country. And it is conceptualized by Dr. Sankita Menon, who is head and dean of the Consciousness Studies program and School of Humanities at NIAS, and also by Dr. Shankar Rajaram, a wonderful scholar and poet who is a postdoc fellow at NIAS as well. So, along with Dr. Sankita Menon and Dr. Shankar Rajaraman, I am Meera Kumar, and there is Preet Kona, scholars here who are also very much interested in poetry and music. So, Kavyalab comes in two forms. One is Kavyalab Vaishishtya, where a certain poet who is more experienced will be sharing with us the nuances of poetry writing, poetry form, and things like that. And we also have Kavyalab Vaivithya, where different poets come together in a informal, semi-formal kind of platform where we share our poetry and comments on it, gets feedback, and basically just really enjoy the written word. So today we have one of those Vaidya sessions, and without further ado, I would request Preet to invite our poets and speak a little bit about them and introduce them. So welcome everyone to this beautiful session. We all look forward to listening to the poets and enjoying poetry today. Over to you, Preet.
Thank you so much, Veera. First of all, namaskar and a very warm welcome to one and all. And I'm really happy. Today we have a wonderful set of poets with us. The first poet of the evening would be Sudarshan Muralidhara, uh, software developer by profession, graduate in computer science and engineering, an active practitioner of classical poetry and sketch art, and abiding interests in Indian languages, temple architecture, sculptures, classical art forms, and philosophical studies. Very happy to have you with us, Mr. Sudarshan.
Thank
And
you very much, Prince. Yeah.
after Sudarshanji, we have Sundaram. Mr. Sundaram Ramachandran is from Bangalore. He is an MS in System Sciences from sunny Binghamton. He's always been interested in literature and poetry and has indulged in it as a hobby, which has increased significantly over the last 15 years. He has also written short stories over the same period and has recently published an ebook available through Amazon Kindle titled Ascent into Inner Space, a celebration of the human spirit. He's interested in the interplay of science, spirituality, aesthetics, literature, and how they shaped and are shaped by human endeavor, finally culminating in what we understand as history. Thank you, Sundaramji, for being here with us today. And after Sundaramji, we have Dr. Usha Sridhar. Dr. Usha Sridhar obtained a PhD with a gold medal from the Indian Institute of Science back in the late 80s. She's now an independent researcher. She's passionate about poetry and short stories that capture the beauty and variety of life, its poignancy and verve, its sadness and depth, and its highs and lows, in the folds of picturesque words and imageries. In her work, she tries to tell tales from her observations of the many slices of life around her and the weft and weave of its dreams. She's a published author and poet and has been writing fiction and poetry in English for the last 5 years. And some of her publications, poems are Life Matters, Drenched in Reverie, Heightened Senses, Subtle Whispers, and a few more books to her credit. She's also received a number of prizes and awards conferred by leading literary societies. Thank you so much, all the three poets, for being here with us. Looking forward to today's session. And we have around 10 to 15 minutes for each poet. And I now request Sudarshan to start with his recital. Over to you, Sudarshan.
Yeah, thank you, Preet. First of all, for the starters, namaste to all, and thank you very much to for considering me to be a part of this esteemed session. I've been following Kavyala for quite some time now. So, going by today's poetry, so I'd like to present three standalone verses of mine in three different languages. So the first one being in Sanskrit, and the second one being in Kannada, and the third one being in Telugu. So the standalone verses, or otherwise called muktakas in Sanskrit, they try to deal with one particular topic at a time. Because if it's a wholesome kavya or a wholesome epic or epic poetry, only then we'll get to deal with the whole story. But then we try to condense whatever we like to say within one particular verse. So I'd like to start with the Sanskrit verse first, and as it has always been a tradition to start with the salutations of Mata Saraswati, so I'd like to present a verse on Mata Saraswati first, which I had composed during this year's Vasanta Panchami, right? So it goes like this. Atmastutau nahiruchistava kimnu matar vachastu rodhayasi yattava kirtanartham bashpairaham yadi bhaje kurushe tadakim etena nutna shishuna kimitopi shakyam. So the meaning goes like this. O mother, are you not interested in self-praise? For you seem to have blocked the vocabulary reserved for your eulogy. Now, what if I pray to you simply with my tears? Because, Vak, as they say in Sanskrit, is Saraswati herself, right? So, the biggest shortcomings is that we have to use Saraswati herself to describe Saraswati. So, using Saraswati to describe Saraswati might end up in some kind of a self-praise. And, being the humblest of all and the mother of all, now Saraswati might not really be interested in a self-praise. So, I'm referring to her saying, "Oh mother, are you not interested in self-praise? For the self-same reason, you seem to have blocked the vocabulary reserved for your eulogy." Okay, so vachastu rodhesi yat tava kirtanartham, right? Whatever I've reserved for your eulogy, you're just trying to block all of them. Bashpairaham yadi bhaje. Now, what if I pray to you simply with my tears? Kurushe tada kim. What would you do then, right? Etena nutna shishuna kimitopi shakyam. Now, I am a newborn baby to you, right? Like I'm like a newborn baby. We might, like ascend to greater heights, but, in front of Saraswati, we are always, her kids. Etena, now what can this newborn do apart from, crying? Newborns cannot think of anything else, right? So, etena nutna shishunapi kim itopi shakyam. So, the newborn cannot do anything apart from this. So, thus goes the meaning of the Sanskrit verse. And then I'd like to take up my second verse, which is in Kannada. And I'd like to just add a footnote to the Sanskrit verse. So the first Sanskrit verse was in a chandas or in a meter called as Vasanta Tilaka. It's quite a famous meter within Sanskrit. The second one, which is in Kannada, is there in a meter called as Bhamini Sharpadi. So now this is a standalone verse which I had composed around 2 to 3 years back from now on Krishna. So before that, do I have the option of sharing the screen? Yeah, thank you. I think the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
I think you can share your screen.
I can share it, is it? Okay. Because there's a sketch art associated with it, which
please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I hope it's visible here, right? So this is the sketch art which I sketched out last year, I think sometime during Krishna Janmashtami or something, because I don't precisely remember the date. So this is completely in Hoysala style. Krishna in Chaturbhuja holding the chakra and the shankha or the conch, and then he's playing the flute and while he's dancing. So people who do understand the nuances of Hoysala temple sculpture may as well relate to all those features, which are very much striking within Hoysala sculpture. So I'm just stopping my share and continuing with my verse.
If you
So the
want it to be on screen with the poetry going along, I think if people could relate, I think you could have it on the screen.
No, actually, it's not directly related. It's just Dancing Krishna. It's not directly related to Dancing Krishna, but it's related to Krishna. So I don't think it's directly relatable over there. So the verse goes like this: ಮುನ್ನಡೆಯೇ ಬಲು ದೇರು ನಗರಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಣ್ಣೆಗಂಪದು ದೂರ ಉಳಿದಿರೆ ಪೊನ್ನ ಕದಿರನು ಸುತೆಯ ಮೈದಡವುತಿರೆ ಮಗ್ಗುಲಲಿ ಇನ್ನು ಕೆನ್ನೀರ್ ದೊರೆಗಳನೆ ಬಗೆದು ಅಣ್ಣ ಪೊನ್ನೀರ್ ದೊರೆಯ ನೋಟವ ಕಣ್ಣ ತುಂಬಿಕೊಳೆನುವ ತರಳನು ಮನಕಳವನಿಗೆ. Okay, so the motion of harmony goes somewhat like this: na 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 na. So there are 3, 4, 3, 4 matras, which are it goes in a singer-song manner with 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 matras. So that's how Bhamini Shatpadi looks like. So the meaning of the verse goes like this. Now Akrura comes to escort Krishna and Balarama to Mathura for the famed Dhanuryaga, which is which was being performed by Kamsa. So here the chariot is moving away and away from the village, that is Vrindavan. Munnadeye baluderu nagarakke. Munnadeye means as the chariot moves forward. As it moves forward, baluderu is the big chariot. Nagarakke. Nagara means to the town or the city, to Mathura, right? So as the chariot moved farther from the village towards the city of Mathura, benne gampadu dura udidire. Benne in Kannada means butter, right? Benne gampu means the scent of the butter. Benne gampadu dura udidire. And as the scent of the butter was left behind, as the chariot moved farther from the village, the scent of the butter was left behind in Vrindavan. Okay, now that's a real sad scenario. And then the chariot is moving, right along the course of river Yamuna. Ponna kadiranu suteya maidadavutire maggulali. Ponnu means gold. Kadir means rays, right? The one with golden rays is Ponna Kadira. Okay, so the one with golden rays is sun, and the sun is, caressing his daughter. His daughter is none other than Yamuna. Now, river Yamuna is considered to be Surya Deva's daughter. Ponna kadiranu sutaya maidadavutire maggulali. And along the course of the way, or of the chariot's way, the river Yamuna is flowing, and that is being caressed by the sun's rays. That means the sun's rays are reflecting on the river. ಇನ್ನು ಕೆನ್ನೀರ್ ದೊರೆಗಳನೆ ಬಗೆದು ಅಣ್ಣ ಪೊನ್ನೀರ್ ದೊರೆಯ ನೋಟವ ಕಣ್ಣ ತುಂಬಿಕೋ. Kennir in Kannada, in Acha Kannada or pure Kannada means blood. Okay, Kennir doregalane bagedu. So Krishna, already realizing that the scenes awaiting them are all blood based. Okay, so he exclaimed, brother, to Balarama. He exclaimed to his brother, look at the gold based river. Ponnir means the river of gold or the waters of gold. Have a look at the waters of gold, because it's going to be Kennir after that. So please have a look at Ponnir right now. Ponnir doreya notava kanna tumbikolenuva taralanu manakalaveniಗೆ. So he says, brother, look at the gold based river and please fill your eyes to your heart's content with the scene, because they might, so that you might not be getting to witness this scene once again in your life. And true to its sense, Krishna never returns back to Vrindavan. It is Balarama who actually visits Vrindavan once in his lifetime again, but then Krishna never visits. So he tells Balarama that fill your eyes and heart with that particular scene of the gold based river, the golden river. Okay, so may that boy strengthen our minds. Tarala means boy. May that young lad, let him strengthen our minds. So that is the verse in Kannada. And then my last verse is in Telugu. So I'd like to present my screen again. Okay, so this is yet another art, and my verse in Telugu is on Shiva. Okay, so Shiva who is dancing. So this was sketched out by me some 2 years back, starting right from the day of Shivaratri, and it took around 5 days for me to complete it. Even this one is in Hoysala style. So Shiva is having 10 hands over here with various weapons. So he carries a battle axe, and then he carries his drum or the damaru, and he carries his trishula and the sword and the pasha or the rope over here. And then there is the khatwanga or the club, and then there is the kapala or the skull. Okay, so he holds a bow and an arrow, and then here goes the snake. So there is a famed verse which says, Pashankushahi Damaruka Kapala Shulaihi Khatwanga Shukti Sharachapa Yutair Bhavanti, from Bhaskaracharya's Lilavati, right? That verse describes what are the 10 weapons that, Lord Shiva holds. So I guess you can see all those skulls, embedded in his Jata Makuta or matted locks. So this is a classical example of a Hoysala sculpture. So if you could ever get to visit the famed temples at Belur or Halebeedu, you will get to see such sculptures. Okay, so now Shiva, which I just presented, I've named it as Samhara Tandava Murti, or the one who is busy in the dance of destruction, since he's the Layakarta. So my Telugu verse goes thus. Okay, now Shiva is the one who taught what Natya is to his disciple called as Tandu, and Tandu taught it to Bharata once again. So therefore, since it was taught to Tandu, okay, he asked Tandu, and he asked Tandu to teach this Natya Shastram to Bharata, sage Bharata, who again codified Natya Shastra. So from the name Tandu came the name Tandava, which means dance. Now the two different dharmis in Natya Shastra are well famed, called as Lokadharmi and Natya Dharmi. So Natya Dharmi mainly deals with a dramatic representation of real world entities. Now you may not really possess all those real world entities. For example, now if you need to show a lamp, you need not actually possess a lamp, right? Using various your hastamudras, you can actually show a lamp. Now that is Natya Dharmi, and Lokadharmi is the actual possession that you might have, or this Lokadharmi might be shown in all the props that you use, or the kind of language, or even in the Vachika that you use. So there are different things, and my Telugu verse is based on that. So this is in a meter called as Kanda Padyamu. So they say in Telugu, Kandamu Rasina Vade Kavi. So he alone is the poet who writes in Kanda. Okay, so Kanda is such a basic meter in both Kannada and Telugu languages. So it has been derived out of a Sanskrit meter called as Kanda originally. So my verse goes like this: Dharmi Dvayambu Kaladani Urmin Tagu Natya Vidulu Munu Jeppa Jagan Nirmiti Puraharu Natyapu Dharmi Anaga Loka Dharmi Tatyam Baguna. So the meaning is Natya Vidulu, or the scholars of Natya, they claim that there are two dharmis, which are Natya Dharmi and Loka Dharmi, as I previously said. Dharmi Dvayambu, or the couplet of the dharmis, Kaladu, means they exist. So say Urmi means in the earth, on the planet or on the earth. So all the scholars of Natya claim that there are two dharmis which exist in the world, right? But Jagan Nirmiti Puraharu Natyapu Dharmi Anaga Loka Dharmi Tatyam Baguna. But when the whole creation of the world itself is the Natya Dharmi of Shiva, how can one claim that Loka Dharmi is real? Right? Now you can imagine this entire cosmos to be the Natya Dharmi, or whatever sun or the fire, right? Now if Shiva shows that way, now that's how the fire came into existence. So the whole world, it shows how the whole world is Maya. The verse, that's what it's trying to say, how the world is Maya, and it just seems to be in the place due to Natya Dharmi of Shiva. and we consider the Tandava of Shiva to be, ever going, right, or ever continuing. There's not a second when Shiva stops his Natyam, because the whole movement of whatever animate and inanimate that is present within the universe, that is considered to be the dance of Shiva, right? So when the whole world itself is Natya Dharmi of Shiva, Jagan Nirmiti Puraharu. Purahara is the one who vanquished, the three cities called Tripuras. Okay, so he is called as Purahara, which is none other than Shiva. Puraharu Natyapu Dharmiyanaga. Jagan Nirmitiye Puraharuni Natya Dharmiyanaga. Loka Dharmi Tathyam Bhaguna. How can one claim that Loka Dharmi is a reality? So I guess I have presented three of my verses there. So all these three are in three different languages. So I hope the Rasikas and the connoisseurs, esteemed connoisseurs present here, they actually liked my verses and my sketches over there. Thanks a lot, for providing an opportunity to me. And I'd like to take
so much, Sudarshan ji. I think it is absolutely beautiful. Getting in, you brought in meters like Vasanta Tilaka, Kandapadyamu, and the languages also Kannada, Telugu, and Sanskrit. And you see a relation, they're all musical or dancing gods, Saraswati, Krishna, and Shiva. And the sketches are absolutely beautiful. I'm sure all of us will enjoy. I think we will have a discussion session towards the end once all the poets are done. Thank you so much, Sudarshan ji. Now I would request Sundaram ji to begin his recital. Over to you, sir.
Can I share my screen? Yeah. So 6 poems. 5 in English and 1 in Hindi. In each of them, on top, you can read along with me. So I'll the first poem is it draws inspiration from, modern string theory, multidimensional universes, and ties it to human concerns like continuation of life after life, and loneliness and things like that. So I'll start now. Cosmic Odyssey. I navigate network semantic to bridge chasms galactic, search for appropriate incantations to enter the realm of the higher dimensions, and thus compactify distances infinite, and thus thwart eternal night. As I loop through hidden spaces, I still search for those familiar, kind, sexy, interesting faces. Will teleportation be the antidote to incineration? Will I reach Scotty at a party or potty? Will I become Alice as I'm holding my chalice? Am I looking at a telescope or peering at my soul through a microscope? Amidst the turmoil of those cosmic volcanic shears, all that mattered was our fears, tears, and cheers. Now the second poem. This poem is about, it compares two poems, it draws an analogy between the flow of a river and consciousness, the flow of self. And it compares two rivers, the flow of the Nile, which is a long journey, and two other rivers in Central Asia, the Amud Darya and Sir Darya, which used to empty out into the Aral Sea, which is now almost dry. It's now filling up. But the idea is that, there is a legacy in the oasis, and that the journey continues. The Nile and other rivers are the Raman effect. It flows a slender thread of blue, like a dying man hanging on precariously to life and miraculously making it. It flows like a stream of consciousness, binding body and soul, binding humanity, like the healing tears of a broken man, like a thing of beauty, precious and fragile in its vulnerability. Elsewhere in the northeast, in another continent, two other rivers flow, not so long, but through landscapes similar but even more desolate, equally haunted by ghosts of the past, through mountains, deserts, grasslands, seemingly losing themselves in the wastes, far from any sea. But yet they flow not in vain. They live and flow on in underground rivers and channels, mysterious and life-sustaining, branching off like mini tributaries like light diffracting. They live and flow on in the green oasis they sustain, in the clouds above, as if they were tearing their entrails to bridge the oceanic chasm across space-time, microtubule-like bridges of consciousness, thinner than eye can perceive, but which the mind in its wisdom can comprehend. Falcon-like thoughts and matter, both tangible and intangible, take wing and flame-like soar into immortality. The third poem is about how sometimes grief may not be manifest in, or near and dear ones may not be manifest in acts, but in a sense of quiet depression or quite a dark, the absence being felt in a presence, absence having a presence. But at the same time, you make efforts to come out of that. That's what this, it's a kind of celebration, not celebration, but the persistence of the spirit, Laments for loved ones. No heroic acts of courage, no deeds that convey my outrage, just a low, steady light that gets me through the night. No injuries to show, no intense outpouring of sorrow, just a dull ache, scars left in your wake. The darkness in my soul, my apathy as a whole, that I keep alive like a low, steady fire. More than any positive act, I hold higher. As a testimony to your continued presence in my life, the lack whereof has cut me deeper than a knife. I still remember your fiery spirited brightness, a beautiful veil to an all-human kindness, with an almost coiled, silent yet strong presence, like a beautiful green gate, barrier or fence, wheeling and yet reflecting the treasures within its defense, as if saying, here is Mother Nature. A strong, beautiful, kind, and a bridge to all that lies beyond her. In the landscapes of my mind, I tread the paths of yore to find you, a sailor, back from your voyages, a reality precipitating out of marriages. And suddenly, we are chatting and reminiscing apace, basking in the cozy, crackling warmth of the fireplace, thinking of the grand journey that we are about to undertake, the golden road to Samarkand. The next poem is in Hindi. It's transliterated. This is a romantic shairi addressed to a woman. It's unrequited, basically. But the poet asked to be just allowed to be in her presence. He's not even asking for her love. Shama to aap hain, jal mein raha hun. The translation is giving alongside. Ishq ek yagar. Shama to aap hain, jal mein raha hun. Tara to aap hain, mit mein raha hun. बादल की तरह छा गई हैं आप, बरस में रहा हूं. आपकी शान से आप अपनी तरफ आकर्षित करती हैं, पर इस शान के पीछे छुपी हुई ताकत, हिम्मत और नाजुकता का अंदाजा सिर्फ मुझे है. मैं बिल्कुल नहीं कह रहा हूं आप मुझसे इश्क फरमाएं, बस ये इजाजत दीजिए मैं आपकी दमक में मग्न हो जाऊं. The fifth poem, this has Sufistic undertones, and this is not really, this celebrates togetherness, okay? And as the thing says, it's, okay, there may be some hint of, but it doesn't, it's against excessiveness or against extreme, so it's a moderation, but social gatherings, and it's set somewhere in a high mountain place somewhere. That's what my imagination is. Like Darwaza, in Turkmenistan, that's not in a mountain, but if you, it's, some kind of plateau, and you have some, gathering. That's the thing. A night in heaven, an anticipation of a evening of anticipations and expectations. My soul resonates to strange vibrations. Celebrations on the high plateau and the mountain fastness. Crowds thronging the remote vastness. More than an evening pastime. Explorations of a crack in space-time. As I descend into the mysterious recesses, my being ascends as it explores and processes. Evolution mingling with revolution. An attempt at finding my core while letting my spirit soar. Imbibing the essence of the ages. Colorful and rich tapestry of humanity and the wisdom of the sages. Meeting Amazons, scholarly dons. Women and men who thrive on the playground's lawns. And old soldiers and knights with tales that can last many nights. Not just a release of passions, but an exploration of hidden dimensions. Each person a star with a spirit no circumstances could mar. waves of warmth, camaraderie, and conversation, intellect mingling with emotion, rejuvenating the stream of life and consciousness. As a flame torch burning in the darkness, a taste of heaven on earth. Of adventures there is no dearth. As the night flows into dawns, and the dew moistens the lawns, the memories of the night bringing smiles and tears, amidst days, cares, and fears, until it is night once more. Again, time for us to soar. This last poem is kind of set in Adoni, which is a city in Andhra Pradesh, and which I have chosen to exemplify the confluence of Indian and Central Asian cultures, Turkic, Afghan. So the Greek, name Adonis is actually a Greek youth who's a he is lover of Greek goddess Aphrodite. But I have chosen, in our case, the Greek influence is modulated by the Central Asian influence. So that is why I have taken Adonis as an example of an Indian Central Asian guy. So it celebrates the coming together of India and Central Asia, Afghanistan, all those areas. Adonis of Adoni. He didn't wear no army, but man, did he like the LIIT. He was the Adonis of Adoni. In these hot, desolate, rocky wastes, he rises, a symbol that love and hope do not go waste. Man of splendid taste, our Adonis of Adoni. No Don he was no Dhoni, but a king of hearts, our Adonis of Adoni. He didn't eat no sushi, he didn't bathe in no jacuzzi, but he sure was a wizard Buzkashi, our Adonis of Adoni. A bridge between trance and cis, awaiting his own test, her kiss, her caress, awaiting the Amazon of his destiny, who will be strong in mind, heart, shoulder, hip, thigh, and knee. He waits the Adonis of Adoni. No Gora Sahib, more a Central Asian Nawab, transplanted in Indian soil and flowering and flourishing here like a sun royal, a sun loyal. The Oxus and the Jaxartes, mingling with the Ganges, the emergence of the hinterland, the mingling of the highlands, the Central Asian, Afghan, Tibetan, Anatolian, and the Deccan, a symbol that when people aspire, they can. Quintessential man of the center, finding a center, the Adonis of Adoni. At home in his majestic rocky plateau, looking like someone from the times of Plato, like a living, breathing, moving historical sculpture, symbolizing the Apollonian-Dionysian union of rapture and sculpture, who, when someone perplexed him to take the piss, was frank enough to admit, I don't know this. Adonis. Would have been at home in Kashgar, Samarkand, or Ghazni, but made his home in Adoni. A cry rings out among all the noise and hiss. Hail Adonis, Adonis. That's it. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that is beautiful. There is so much of beauty, melancholy, grandeur, love, sacrifice seen through your poems. I especially like the Hindi poem, and I come very close to Adonis. I was modern vocabulary and your contextual set back in time. It was really beautiful to listen to that. Thank you so much. And I would now request Dr. Usha to begin with the recital. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. For today, I have selected poems where nature has played the muse, and I want to share the learnings I've got from it. So, as if she hides, and I'm talking of nature here, as if she hides in her shadows, a shade that we might see and find in all our daily sorrows, just a moment or two of glee. I'm starting my first poem. It's called Crowing in the Beach. A crow loved the beach. It did like to preach, so it would always teach the waves to keep off the shore's reach. To maintain peace, it should not encroach, or it will be forced to act to impeach. The waves, however, refused to obey. Their displeasure they did convey. They declined to stay away, so every day the shore they did pass by, letting the crow know they were just nearby. The battle raged between them. They created total mayhem. No one was a clear winner, it did seem. Solution was never found to the ensuing problem. The crow gave a clear warning, but the waves came to the shore pounding. The crow would back away temporarily. When the waves started receding, the crow would come back with the warning. The passers-by couldn't decide whether it was a battle or a game. They hoped that neither would see it. It gave them joy of great magnitude. The other crows gathered there, joined this crow in its game rare. Some thought it was nature's ways mere, that the waves came often to the shore. They chose to outright ignore it, therefore. Some other crows, meek they were. The thumping waves they did not dare. They would be hurt, they were sure. So from very far on the seashore, at the waves, they only did glare. Our valiant crow, however solo, refused to bid the game adieu. He was all the visitors' hero for challenging the waves in toto. Talking of surprises, we often learn to value our gifts only, alas, when we lose them. And sometimes when we see others value them in their difficult times. I tried to put together several moments of studied silence that dawn on us, and sometimes we find a glowing truth hidden in the darkened inner course. It's an extremely long poem, so I'm going to just read a few excerpts from it. My mind wandered like driftwood, saw a dirty, ragged lad playing nearby. Suddenly, as if on cue, he raced across with his begging bowl. Giving a toothless smile, he bared his soul. Haven't eaten in days, have a family to support. Wretched lives we lead, have a heart. Variegated images of celebrities adorned his attire. I will be richer than them, he slyly swore. To dream big, the lad didn't need a license. I introspected in studied silence. My mind wandered like driftwood. A frenzied crowd choked the labyrinthine street. From the mayhem, for the public, there was no easy retreat. Rustic dance moves, cacophonic music shattered the hush. Pretense was abandoned, the ground truth was harsh. Unfazed, stone deaf, sat a determined lass. Enlightened by her books, she geared up for class. Wise to reality, she faced challenges with great poise. Two contrasting visuals brought to light life's travels. I introspected in studied silence. My mind wandered like driftwood. Hatred scorched cross-cultural ties, delicately intertwined. Bigot groups armed to their teeth rose up charged. Stoking flames of rivalry, they gunned for vengeance. Gut-wrenching screams of pain heightened the tensions. Amidst the acerbic ambience stood resolutely a young couple, confident that love would emerge triumphant in the long struggle. Waves rise and ebb tamely as they reach the shore. That is nature's design, set to a musical score. But how can humans aspire for a balance? I introspected in studied silence. My mind wandered like driftwood. I turned the pages of a vexatious history book. It was like a caged bird in trauma, pleading to be set free to end the sordid drama. Invaders, victims, two sides of a coin. Ingenuity of interpretation could reverse a perspective. Devote chose narratives that are clearly subjective. Clearing the air shrouded in layers of ignorance required seeking an intervening light of fair guidance. I introspected in studied silence. My mind wandered like driftwood. Thoughts lost in the wilderness have yet to find voice. Wise yet to become to make it matter. Long road ahead yet to traverse, but being passive is not an option. The third poem is a descriptive poem. So the visual imagery is more important. It's called Light in the Forest. In the dark, lay ensconced deep, the secluded moist woods. The still night unburdened its dreariness on a tedious landscape. My heart felt heavy, wretched, vision temporarily blinded, a nameless sight, an abandoned child, fending off fear and grief. I groped in despair for a sign of good tidings. Anguish perished, hope arose anew. Nature's cheer blew away the blues of gloom. Green hues of the wood came to light. A twinkling spray of light left one in dizzy rapture. The night stage was ablaze with a warm glow, igniting imagination at the unfolding art of fire. A vision splendid, unadulterated pleasure. Fireworks aplenty flitted past restlessly, leaving a trail of light, a glow. 100 images, maybe more, crisscrossed at will, teasing the shades and shadows to colors of burning embers. Glittering images of silent fireworks on display, suffused through the pathless woods in merriment. Alluring was nature's chiaroscuro effects on a somber night. The fireflies wooed a velvet darkness to light. Conspiring with the gentle breeze in its benevolent design, I lingered a while to savor the vivid moment. Long it will remain drenched in memory for posterity. A take on the history of fire, it's called the Blazing Trails. The Homo sapiens huddled together in a cave for shelter. Their revered gods were unleashing fury to express their anger. The howling winds, relentless downpour, showed no mercy. At such times, they felt vulnerable when very lonely. The darkening skies thundered loudly from above. The flashing lightning blinded their sight. Where had they erred? How should they correct the situation? They prayed in votive murmurs, lacking an imagination. They came out cautiously the next day with their long staffs. A red creature hanging on a tree was in their path. They shouted, screamed, threw stones to scare it away. It clung on tightly to the birch, didn't budge to their dismay. One person ventured out boldly to explore. He thought it must be strong as it showed no fear. He showed off his dancing skills but couldn't impress. It became bigger. Could it have taken offense? From far he poked it with his long stick. On his club it curled, refused to get unstuck. The staff was getting smaller, the red flame bigger. He threw it on the grass bitterly, began to shiver. The red being began to spread far and wide. Must be an insatiable eater, the green grass began to disappear. It seemed to like the wind. Was it its companion? It danced to the wind merrily with an abandon. When water was thrown at it, it disappeared, but with the aid of the wind, it again reappeared. They named the new find fire. Early men were hunters and gatherers. To the forces of nature, they were prisoners. Of the 5 elements, fire was the feared one. It hurt them, burned them. Why was it to them still a stranger? Oh, voila, change was closer. Fire they were to discover was a great boon. A piece of meat fell on a fire nearby. Bravely, the woman retrieved it, started to cry. To soothe the exhilarating pain, put her finger into her mouth. She squealed in wonder. The meat tasted very delicious. Fire no longer looked malicious. Others followed her, did as she bid. They conquered fear, were no longer timid. At their discovery, the excitement they couldn't conceal. Shunning the raw meat, began enjoying hot-cooked meals. Bravo, woman, proud of you we do feel. Thunder from right under our feet, you did steal. They began to build, put off fire at will. Gathering around it gave them a new thrill. Fire took center stage in their daily activities. It added a zing to their life, changing the mundane priorities. Fire was a witness to the birth of nascent culture. Dancing, singing around the fire made for a delightful picture. Man and beast were in direct conflict to survive. Fire provided the perfect security cover to end the strife. Humans no longer suffered the presence of unwelcome guests. Fire helped them hone weapons for the ensuing fight. They added many more success stories to their conquests as they took giant strides to become supremo in their quest. I just want to recite one small poem, short one. Thank you. The wise often say that wisdom comes to humans when they don't have much need for it, for by then the ability to act and commit mistakes is itself blunted. In the last poem, I tried to portray a different angle to the woes of delayed wisdom in the shape of thorny issues daunting a dainty flower. It's called the thorny woes. It's a short one. A thorny plant at the wayside, by passers-by it was decried. It grew wild and unattended. All hoped that in the sun it wilted. It had sharp thorns along the branches. Leaves grew around it in tangles. It was a dreadful sight. Even the animals rejected it outright. The awful smell that emanated had masses scurrying for cover. The dry, hard fruits on plucking gave out latex that was infuriating. A flower bloomed on the tree. There was all around some glee. The flower bore a few rainbow hues. A new energy in the tree it did infuse. The fragrance from the flower spread. The gentle breeze was the courier. The birds and the bees couldn't resist the bright flower's temptation. The flower rocked delicately as the wind caressed it intimately. In the day, the flower looked splendid against the warm rays of the sun mighty. The flower loved the attention. It soon became a bit vain. It hung on to the praise sung. The arrogance in it became strong. I'm special, it said out aloud. This silly tree can't do without me. I'm entitled for many big things. From this place, I must take wings. What am I doing among thorny shrubs? My growth they would stub. The flower opened up lazily, expecting the same amount of psychophancy. Another day, another bouquet, time to accept the hoorays. Why did the people grimace? Where are the bees and the birds? Look at the lousy flower, yelled one. They all made a lot of fun. Wretched tree, lamented the flower. Will repair the damage sooner than later. The flower caught a sight of itself, was transfixed to the stem in disbelief. Shriveling and drooping, the picture was alarming. It suddenly felt weak and tired, no longer an object to be desired. The flower fell to the ground, laid to rest without a song. The tree shed a couple of leaves, laying on it a wreath with grief. Though nature was a muse, from my collection, I tried to pick out 5 different styles of writing. The descriptive style was in that Firefly. The narrative poem, which a few engage in, was The History of Fire. The thought-provoking fire, poem which I cut short, was The Studied Silence. The first and the last one are more emotive, an outpouring of emotion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it was absolutely beautiful, spectacular beat. It will definitely picturesque. The words, the imageries, your description. Am I audible?
Yeah, now.
Yeah, okay. I told ma'am. So I told your descriptions were so picturesque and so vivid. Beat descriptions of the night, the beach, the forest, the 5 elements, Homo sapiens, thunder, sky, wind, the fireflies, birds. I think it is absolutely beautiful. So it's filled with your personal experiences, so much wisdom, history, and so many tales to tell through those poems. It's brilliant, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I think with this, we open the space for discussions and comments. If there is anything that the poets also would want to interact between each other and anybody else from the from the audience would want to comment, ask anything to the poets, I think we are open now. I think, yeah, Srinatha ji is here. I see his hands up.
Hi, so yeah, I shaved my beard, but okay. So everyone, I really enjoyed all of the three poets' work. I mean, I felt it was so different. I had a few questions. So for Sudarshan sir, he wrote in Sanskrit, Kannada and Telugu. I don't speak Kannada and Telugu, but I really enjoyed the verses. So I felt like I was wondering if there's any difference in writing in those three languages, besides grammatically. Obviously, they are
Well,
different languages grammatically.
Well, there are a few similarities and few differences. Of course, each language is unique in its own way. So Kannada and Telugu are those two languages which have directly inherited, from the Sanskrit poetic tradition. There is so many meters which are used in Sanskrit language are directly used in Kannada and Telugu equally. Whereas both these languages have their own unique features and have their own unique meters as well. For example, the one that I recited in Kannada is in a meter called as Shatpadi. There are different types of Shatpadis. So Shat stands for 6 and Padi means lines. So there were 6 lines over there. Okay, so each Shatpadi verse has 6 lines. So we have different types of Shatpadis like Shara Shatpadi, Kusuma Shatpadi, Bhoga Shatpadi, Bhamini Shatpadi, Parivardhini Shatpadi, and Vardhaka Shatpadi. Okay, so Vardhaka Shatpadi is longest of all. It has like, five groups of five matras like that. So this one, Bhamini Shatpadi, is the most beautiful of all, the remaining Shatpadis. So it is somewhat like a median among the Shatpadis. So all these Shara Shatpadis, all, the different Shatpadis, they are, 2 to 3 matras, and the other ones are like really long. Now this one, is somewhere in the middle. So which makes it, really wonderful to listen to. So the famed poet Kumaravyasa has authored his, magnum opus Karnataka Bharata Katha Manjari, or otherwise called Kumaravyasa Bharata, the Mahabharata in Kannada, right, in the self-same Bhamini Shatpadi. Okay, so that is one thing. All the Shatpadis are, very much a property of Kannada, I should say, right? So apart from that, we have some meters like, belonging to the Amshat Chandas category, right? Like Tripadis and the Sangatyas. So all these belong to Kannada as well. Whereas in Telugu, we have certain meters, which are very much reserved for Telugu. But then, yeah, we have been using them between Kannada and Telugu also, like Ataveladi, Tetagiti, and Sisapadya. Sisapadya makes use of both Ataveladi and Tetagiti, all these things. So, there are different types of versifications, just like, there are certain meters specific to Sanskrit. But then, I think all the Sanskrit meters can be used to compose poetry in Kannada and Telugu, right? Like Anushbeat, Anushtup, or Arya, or any other chandas, we can make use of the same chandas or meter to compose metrical poetry in these two languages. So if we look at Tamil or Malayalam, they have their own set of chandas, and they don't come directly under, they don't directly inherit from the Sanskrit poetic tradition. Now there are meters like Venba and all in Tamil, but that is, very much, part and parcel of the Tamil culture, and, the part and parcel of Tamil poetry tradition only. Whereas here we have both, we have our own indigenous, both in Kannada and Telugu. Okay, we have our both indigenous meters as well as we inherit from Sanskrit.
Okay.
Yeah, so another question, another thing I noticed in Dr. Sundaram's poems is that he used a lot of imagery from modern science, like string theory and so on. So I was just curious about what inspired you to combine those two things, because I didn't understand many of the things. I mean, it's so technical, the science, and what led you to see the science as being poetic? And I mean, yeah.
No, actually, I mean, look, I mean, all said and done, I felt it. I've been interested in string theory. I mean, I'm not great at, I mean, I don't know much about it, but I know that there are multiple dimensions. I mean, I'm fascinated by that. And I know about wormholes. I mean, I'm something about it. And also at that time, I think my friend on Facebook was saying that some people have written poetry on Astrophysics people they have some poetry. So that kind of got me thinking. And there are some themes, all these themes like, incineration. I mean, what happens finally, So the human themes, all surrender, whatever the cosmos. I mean, we are still human beings, right? So what matters for us is where we fit in. So at the same time, we have to be linked to the overall, So that grand and intimate have to be linked. So that is what I'm trying to address. So that's the thing. See, actually, every poem had a kind of narration. I hope people could read that.
Yes.
Because without that, it's difficult to explain. That's the thing.
Yeah, and just I wanted to congratulate Dr. Usha as well, because I felt the command, your command on the language was superb. I mean, it's kind of like every line was so precisely written that it's amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Srinatha ji. Srinatha ji is currently a doctoral scholar at University of Oxford, and he's also a wonderful poet. He was one among our panel poets in one of the previous sessions. I always find these interactions more engaging and so much more information coming out. Thank you, Sudarshan ji, for the elaborate answer, and also Sundaram sir for answering. We'll open any other questions, comments, suggestions. You can either raise your hands. We are a small space. If people could also switch on their videos for direct interactions, I think that would be really nice. Meera, I think you want to say something. Yeah.
Thank you, Preet. Am I audible?
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that Sundaram sir's poems were very unpretentious and very interesting too, because they mixed so many things together. It was much lifelike, and a lot of funny alliterations and a lot of funny rhymes. So that did catch our attention for sure. And then about Dr. Usha ma'am's poems, I just felt that some of it reminded me of Victorian England. I'm not sure why. But, yeah, so I'm a student of literature and I am a fan of Victorian poetry. So somehow your last but one poem about, I think, a poem about flowers and how, that image the flower finally becoming a wreath. Somehow it reminded me of a Victorian style of writing about Arnold, about Rossetti, and I did that. And unfortunately or fortunately, I could not hear some lines of your poems because of the glitches in network, but I did hear words, and then I ended up connecting them in ways I wanted to.
I'm sorry about that.
So which then again became some sort of a deconstructive reading, I would think, as I heard a little bit of this and that and connected some things. So I heard a poem about fire, the history, and I heard a piece about lightning and how, and women and cooking. So I was just thinking how, I am not sure if that was the line you wrote, but I was just thinking how women would just raise their hand and probably catch hold of lightning and make a fire and cook food. Like that's the kind of image that went into my mind.
Okay.
So anyway,
I think the audio was very bad. Even your voice, I'm not able to hear properly actually.
Yeah. I think the network issues are from our side. Your audio.
Okay.
Not able to hear properly.
Okay. All right. So anyway, to sum it up, I really did enjoy your poem, whatever bits I could hear.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meera.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Meera. I think Meera created her own set of understanding of Dr. due to the technical glitches.
Preet, that is the beauty of poems. You render a poem and there are many layers to the poem and you leave it to the reader to extract, give an interpretation or pull out a layer of thing, which is what she was doing. Very wonderful.
Absolutely. Yes. I think Amrita Valli has something to say. Amrita, over to you.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say, every time I come to Kavya Lab, I always learn something new. So no matter where I'm coming from, there's something to take away. And that was especially true with Sudarshan sir's pieces. It's always an education when even regardless of I think more than the language, it's the degree of expertise that he comes with it. I wonder how many years he spent honing his skills and being so immersed in something. And there were a few lines from each of the poets that particularly struck me, and I just wanted to share. So Sundaram says, a thing of beauty at once precious and fragile in its vulnerability. That is something, I don't know, it's still sort of going through my head, some beauty being fragile. And I really loved his comparison of the river, its network and consciousness, and the threads, the microtubules. That was the thing is, I think the beauty in bringing concepts from astrophysics or even abstract concepts in cognitive science and trying to write a poem about them is that it allows you to understand these concepts better. I see poetry as not being something added to your learning of these concepts, but something actually aiding you in studying these concepts in the first place. And even Dr. Usha's poems, I really loved the crow in the beach. And I was wondering, I got this image of, I've seen this happen on a beach where there's a crow standing and the water's flowing in. It jumps back and then it caws and then it jumps forward. That's that bang on image came to my head.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, and of course, I had a question actually.
Yeah.
Do you think that as humans, we tend to personify nature in order to understand nature? So I think you directly hit on this with Blazing Trails and the fact that maybe early humans saw fire as themselves because they had no other conception of what this thing could be. Do you think it's something we just naturally resort to?
I think as poets, we always try to find a muse to work right on. It could either be slices of life, it could be a comedy, it could be nature has been very easy because we are able to not only describe nature and talk about its beauty, but it's very aesthetic and it's very amenable to writing poetry. And if you're able to use that to learn, like when we, even scientists do that, when you wanted to fly, you had to look at a bird that is flying and then you come up with a plane. And even about a motorbike, or you look at a cheetah. So there's a lot of learning in nature if you only pay attention to it. Like you told about the crow in the beach, when you go and sit in the beach, you look at the beauty of the sky, the crimson sun setting. You look at everything, but then if your observation is very keen, you can get inspired and every small thing becomes a muse for you. And this was so inspiring. That day I sat on the beach and I wrote this poem. It was one of my first poems actually. So it's always a muse that inspires and motivates you to do something. It could be nature, it could be anything. The only thing is that nature doesn't talk back to you. So you can personify it in any way you want to.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, that's your perception, right? To sit and maybe another poem would be you having a conversation with your personified nature.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be beautiful. Thank you so much for all your perspectives, all of the poems. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amrita, and thank you, Dr. Sridhar. And now Shankar sir wanted to say something. Dr. Shankar, over to you.
Thank you, Preet, and thank you for thanks to all the poets who recited beautiful poems today. I just have a question to Sudarshan. Sudarshan read out his muktakas today, beautiful muktakas, and in 3 different languages. How did he cultivate his expertise in writing in all? And I know that recently he has been writing more of Sanskrit and also in Hindi. And I know that he has recently written not just a muktaka, but a full-fledged story in Hindi. So I would like to ask him how he cultivated. I don't think he has any family tradition of poetry or scholarship, to my knowledge. But then I would like to ask him how he gained expertise in these various languages.
Well, I believe, Shankar sir, that's no secret. So Hindi has been it was one of my languages since I was a first grader, right, in the school. So it has been since class 1 that I have picked up Hindi. And, I think it was almost a decade, since I had stopped honing my skills in Hindi. So I thought, why not, try composing something in Hindi, which, could help me to brush up my skills in Hindi. So I composed a Laghu Kavya, or a small epic called as Samar Shringar, based on the battle between Satyabhama, who's the wife of Krishna, and then Narakasura. So I think that was, an ultimatum of the feminist heroism, wherein Satyabhama single-handedly takes on the gigantic demon called Narakasura. It is when actually Krishna faints, or he acts as though he's fainting, right? So he faints, and then it is Satyabhama who picks up the bow in her hand, and then she continues the combat with the dreaded Narakasura. So that is what I composed. And coming to Kannada, so Kannada being my mother tongue, I guess you might be well versed with my whole journey of how I came to the contact with Padyapana and Dr. Ganesh and all that. So I think we have been knowing each other since last 9 years or so, since 2013, I believe. So that was how I gained an entry into Kannada. I started composing verses. So, playing within my home pitch, which is Kannada, I don't think it's really difficult. As well, right, from my school days, I had this Hale Kannada, or the classical or the old Kannada poetry, as a part of my syllabus, Kannada syllabus. So my second language was Kannada. And, that actually took my attention, like how exactly, were all these poets composing poetry thousands of years back. So now, the old Kannada, or the classical Kannada poetic tradition, has around 1,300 to 400 years of history. So I was, wonderstruck as to how people were composing in this. So that actually made me get into the field of Hale Kannada, or the old Kannada poetry. And then I tapped on my Telugu skills only recently, I should say, probably in the last 5 to 6 years. But then I wasn't writing anything in Telugu. Telugu was that, one language which I knew how to read and write even before I could understand the language. I never knew how to decipher whatever is there. But then due to the similarity in the scripts of Telugu and Kannada, I could actually read and write Telugu, but I couldn't make most out of it. So in the last 5 to 6 years, I believe, I actually sat and took up notice over, all the Telugu poetic tradition. And then I, gave it a, just by the matter of chance, I believe, I just said, okay, let me bet, whatever is my destiny over here. And then, yeah, I think that's how it has been continuing. I think in whatever poetry I'm doing, I think Dr. R. Ganesh's support is seen throughout in whatever language I do, be it Hindi or Kannada or Telugu or the Sanskrit recently, of course. I think that has been the way. And I have been a linguaphile throughout. So I love learning newer and newer languages. And, these days I've been concentrating on a bit of Marathi and Odia and all those things. So yeah, I do love honing up my skills.
I know that you also know.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, yeah, I can also follow Tamil, but then
I think you write in Urdu too.
Yeah, of course, because my background in the school, it contained a bit of Urdu. So I don't think Urdu and Hindi are really far away, except that, the Shuddha Hindi, or, the purest form of Hindi, yeah, of course, there is a difference. But then, yeah, I guess, I firmly believe that we need to have our roots deeply, into any one of the languages, any of the Indic languages, be it, right? Now, I can strongly claim that, I was able to pick up other languages, other Indic languages, because I had my roots strong in Kannada. So having roots, it's being a developer, if I have to say, a software developer, if we, cultivate our knowledge in any one of the programming languages, okay, or if we know what exactly is the idea behind it, or the algorithm behind it, then we can choose from the array of different programming languages, which would help us to develop our software. So similar to that, the same thing goes with human languages as well, as what I firmly believe in. Thank you. Anything else, sir?
And thank you for your sketches also. They were superb.
Yeah. Thank you. So that has been my hobby since childhood. Yeah.
Thank you, Sudarshan.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And I'd
Thank
like
you
to
so much.
especially, thank Dr. Shankar over here, because, he was the one who first brought unto me the invite of Kavya Lap. And I've been observing his poetry all through, and, his verses from Mathura Bhyudayam are such chest of gems, I should say. Be it his muktakas or his other poetry that he does, especially on social media platform. So I've been a regular follower of all those, and I'm an ardent fan of whatever he does. So I think it's very rare we find somebody like Dr. Shankar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it is beautiful. The spirit of Kavya Lap, you're truly multilingual, so many languages, and having, I think, expertise on all of them, probably all the languages you just mentioned. If there are any further questions, comments, otherwise, I think it's also time we wrap up the session. We'll be opening up the WhatsApp group, and the particular recording will be up on our YouTube channel in the next 2 weeks, the entire session. So you could also share it with your friends and family. I think I don't see any questions as such. We'll be opening up the chat WhatsApp session for if there are any further questions and comments. I think it was absolutely beautiful, Sudarshan sir. All you got in beautiful sketches, all so many languages, and Sundaram sir getting in poetry and science, and Dr. Usha, her personal experiences, nature, such picturesque words. I think it was a wonderful session, and I would personally like the poets on behalf of our team, Kavya Lap and National Institute of Advanced Studies program. And special gratitude to Professor Sangeeta Menon, who is the head and Dean of School of Humanities, for her constant love and support. And thank you one and all, the audience, for being here with us today. And we have our next session, that's Kavya Lap Vaishistya, towards the month end. The details will follow soon on the social networking side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskara.
Namaskaram. Thank you.